many of them are out there? I'll go. You should stay here.
We are talking about The Cabin, also known as A Night in the Cabin. This one is directed by Johan Bodell. So it's actually a Swedish film, but spoken in English language. And it follows an American couple who go to a remote cabin in the middle of kind of a rural area. This guy's parents own this cabin apparently, and it's kind of across this stretch of water. So they go in there for a little bit of a break. They're a couple that aren't getting on so well. And it just so happens that the house across the lake has been invaded by a masked serial killer, for lack of a better word. And, you know, they kind of go there unknowing this. The serial killer has already kind of set up shop here and has been torturing the previous homeowner in this kind of house across the way for some time. Inevitably, they kind of paths cross and they are hunted by this young but a masked serial killer. So that is the basic synopsis here of the movie. What do we think of The Cabin? This movie is proficiently made, I would say. It's takes advantage of its kind of very kind of rural woodland area kind of setting here for kind of to make some really kind of nice exterior shots here that kind of give you a great feeling of isolation. On the technical side, I think the camera work here was all pretty good. Cinematography was well done. The actual kind of like sound editing, all that kind of stuff was all very good. I think the soundtrack to this movie was pretty good. And there are some there's not loads of violence in this film really, but there is one scene which I feel is particularly kind of gruesome to a certain degree in its kind of ferocity and viciousness. But you may think I'm kind of avoiding some big things there. So we have to talk about what I feel doesn't work here. So this movie has a number of things that I feel are just lacking. So first of all, let's talk about the characters and the actors that kind of go with them. The cast here is small. Really, there's 4 actors. We have the couple, the serial killer, and the initial victim. And there's a little stinger at the end as well. But our protagonists, you don't like them. They are, especially the woman, the girl. I'll be honest, I've never seen a more unlikable female character in a movie that I can remember. She is absolutely heinous. Just her attitude towards her boyfriend, the way she kind of essentially attacks him, and then when he kind of defends himself, she kind of, you know, accuses him of being abusive, etc., stuff like that. I was hoping she would get the chop. So unfortunately, if you have a protagonist which is who, I know, you know, we have redemptive arcs in movies, but you just have nothing to gravitate to. She is completely unsympathetic, and I'll be honest, the boyfriend isn't much better because you just think he's so pussy whipped. So you have a really kind of unlikable couple, especially the girl. Our serial killer, you feel, is just really a non-entity in regards to characterization. We don't really get to know him. So he has no real character ultimately, other than he's just some rando serial killer who happens to have turned up in this house. So the characterization isn't great. The acting to go along with them as well, I don't think is particularly strong. It's not terrible, I will say that. It's not terrible acting. But I've got to say, the acting, certainly from our male lead, our male kind of protagonist, I didn't think was particularly good. And our kind of antagonist, this kind of serial killer, again, he just seems, I don't know, they sound like they're speaking, they are Swedish, but they're speaking English. And it just says that they're struggling a little bit. The female lead, whose character I really kind of didn't like at all, I mean, if that's the way her character was written, then fair play, she does a good job of acting, so I will say that. But, you know, I don't know what the intent was here. If she was meant to play a completely unlikable character, then she has absolutely succeeded. But if she was just kind of like let off the leash a little bit and kind of she went way too far. So the characterization isn't good. The acting is okay, but not brilliant, we'll say. The story is just generic. It is just so run-of-the-mill, nothing to write home about. It's not, again, it's not bad. It's just very kind of like a couple of people are running around getting chased by a serial killer. That's it. That is it. So it's kind of a slasher movie. Now, I will admit, I am not the biggest slasher fan. I find them very samey. And this is the perfect example of what I mean. I mean, this really is just a kind of nothing to kind of set it out apart from the crowd. I mean, there's no supernatural element here, to be clear. There's just not a kind of a haunted cabin. But there is a stinger that doesn't make sense if we're calling it a kind of a real life situation that's kind of gone on here. But there you go. So overall, I've got to say, although I feel this movie was competently made, and I feel that it may have its audience if you are just into very, very, you know, huge slasher fans and you just want to consume, you know, as many slasher films as you can. I don't think there's any way this one kind of sets itself apart from the crowd. This doesn't do anything kind of new, really, aside from maybe setting it in Sweden, but is that enough of a reason? For me, it was just kind of very generic, very kind of mundane, and particularly not interesting. And I simply didn't care about the characters because they were just so unlikable to begin with. So that means it's going to be slightly below average for me, so I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.